Dennis Carl Wilson was an American drummer, singer and songwriter. He is best known as a founding member of the rock band The Beach Boys, alongside his brothers, Brian and Carl, cousin, Mike Love, and Al Jardine. Wilson was a member of the band from its formation until his death in 1983, recording 24 studio albums. In 1977, he released a solo album, Pacific Ocean Blue, to widespread critical acclaim. Born in Inglewood, California, Dennis was the middle brother of fellow Beach Boys members Brian Wilson and Carl Wilson. Dennis Wilson was also the only regular surfer of the group, and his personal life exemplified the beach lifestyle that the group's early songs often celebrated. His prominence in the group as a writer and lead vocalist increased as their careers went on into the late 1960s and 1970s. Childhood years: Wilson was the son of Audrey Nava and Murray Gage Wilson. He spent his family years with his brothers and parents in Hawthorne, California. Dennis' role in the family dynamic, which he himself acknowledged, was that of the black sheep. Though anxiety-filled and aggressive at times, he was also sensitive and generous. He was the most often spanked of the Wilson brothers, by their strong-willed father Murray. Possessed with an abundance of physical energy and a combative nature, Dennis often refused to participate in family sing-alongs, and likewise avoided vocalizing on the early recordings made by Brian on a portable tape recorder. However, Dennis would sing with his brothers late at night in their shared bedroom on a song Brian later recalled as our special one we'd sing, titled Come Down from the Ivory Tower. Brian noted of the late-night brotherly three-part harmonies, "We developed a little blend which aided us when we started to get into the Beach Boys stuff." The Beach Boys, Dennis' mother, Audrey, forced Brian to include Dennis in the original lineup of the Beach Boys. Urged by older cousin, Mike Love, Dennis had approached Brian to form a group and compose a song about surfing. The Beach Boys formed in August 1961 and were successful immediately. Though the Beach Boys were named for, and developed, an image based on the California surfing culture, Dennis was the only actual surfer in the band. During the first few years of the Beach Boys, Dennis was given the role of the drummer by his brother, Brian. He quickly learned the basics of drumming at school lessons, and like the other members, he picked up more on the job. Brian Wilson took note of Dennis's limited drumming technique early on, and as the mid-60s approached, often hired session drummers such as Hal Blaine to perform on studio recordings. Dennis accepted this situation with equanimity, generally giving high praise to his older brother's work as Brian's compositions became more mature and complex. However, he did have his own stick style. In 1970, at the height of the band's UK popularity, a New Musical Express writer used the phrase, "as crisp as a Dennis Wilson rimshot." Although he rarely sang backing vocals on stage, occasionally taking a lead, his raspy-sounding vocals were a key ingredient to the group's vocal blend in the studio, and in the late 60s and 70s his lead vocals lent a much-needed bluesy edge to an updating the Beach Boys sound, giving their music new dimensions on the retreat of brother Brian's influence in composing and studio production. Though given few important lead vocals on the early Beach Boys recordings, and This Car of Mine as well as the bridge verse on Girls on the Beach, he sang lead on Do You Wanna Dance?, the group's February 1965 hit. Later that year on Beach Boys Party, Dennis sang an impressive, faithful rendition of the Beatles' You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. He accompanied himself on guitar and like the other Beach Boys became a multi-instrumentalist. His piano playing and composing in particular was praised by Daryl Dragon, his frequent collaborator in the late 60s and early 70s, and was showcased on his Pacific Ocean Blue album. Although he had helped Brian write a few other songs dating back to 1963 at the age of 18, Dennis Wilson's first major released composition was Little Bird, the B-side of the Friend single, coupled with Be Still, also a paean to nature and reflecting on his place in the natural world of which his surfing hobby was only a minuscule part. All at once, age 23, he revealed a fully matured style that had obviously been incubating inside for some time, away from the other members of the band. From 1968 to 1973, as Brian withdrew more and more from active participation with his group, Dennis stepped up as the major creative force of the Beach Boys, having learned production techniques from observing his brother and showing cosmic gothic overtones in composing. At least 2 of his songs were included on all but one of the 6 albums released in that 5-year period, peaking with 4 songs on each of 20/20 and Sunflower. When certain territorial jealousies arose within the band over his growing role, he began to hold back songs for his own projected solo albums. Wilson had further compositions featured on later Beach Boys albums such as 20/20, Sunflower, Carl and the Passions So Tough, Holland as well as others. Sunflower included the track Forever, which not only was popular with fans but also earned him some much-sought praise from brother Brian and father Murray. The album included 3 other songs written by Wilson which were not originally recorded for the album. In 1971, Dennis injured his hand badly enough to prevent him from playing drums for some time, and Ricky Fataar took over as the group's drummer between 1972 and 1974. During this period Dennis acted as a co-frontman alongside Mike Love, as well as playing keyboards and singing. The 1973 live album The Beach Boys in Concert features only Dennis on stage among thousands of fans on the album cover. However, none of his songs were included in the lineup. During the 3-year recording hiatus following Holland, Dennis's voice deteriorated markedly. By then his onstage antics occasionally disrupted the Beach Boys' live shows. In 1974, concurrent with the success of the 60s hits compilation Endless Summer, Wilson returned to his role behind the drums. According to Dennis's biographer, John Stebbins, it was this year that he co-wrote the lyrics and modified part of the melody of You Are So Beautiful at a party with Billy Preston. Charles Manson. In 1968, Dennis Wilson was driving through Malibu when he noticed 2 female hitchhikers, Patricia Krenwinkel and Ella Jo Bailey. He picked them up and dropped them off at their destination. Later on Wilson noticed the same 2 girls hitchhiking again. This time he took them to his home at 14,400 Sunset Boulevard near Will Rogers Park. Wilson then went to a recording session. When he returned at around 3 a.m., he was met in his driveway by a stranger, Charles Manson. When Wilson walked into his home, about a dozen people were occupying the premises, most of them female. Wilson became fascinated by Manson and his followers. The Manson family lived with Wilson for a period of time afterwards at his expense. In late 1968, Wilson reported to journalists, "I told them, the girls, about our involvement with the Maharishi, and they told me they too had a guru, a guy named Charlie who'd recently come out of jail after 12 years. He drifted into crime, but when I met him I found he had great musical ideas. We're writing together now. He's dumb, in some ways, but I accept his approach and have learned from him." Initially impressed by Manson's songwriting talent, Wilson introduced him to a few friends in the music business, including Terry Melcher, whose home at 10,050 Cielo Drive would later be rented by director Roman Polanski and his wife, actress Sharon Tate, and Manson family members would later murder Tate and several others at the home. Manson held recording sessions at the home studio of Dennis' brother, Brian Wilson. Those recordings, if they exist, have never been released. The Beach Boys released a Manson song, originally titled Cease to Exist, but reworked as Never Learn Not to Love, as a single B-side and on the album 20/20. As Dennis Wilson became increasingly aware of Manson's volatile nature and growing tendency to violence, he finally made a break from the friendship by simply moving out of the house and leaving Manson there. When Manson subsequently sought further contact, he left a bullet with Wilson's housekeeper to be delivered with a cryptic message, which Wilson perceived as a threat. In August 1969, Manson family members perpetrated the Tate LaBianca murders. Wilson rarely discussed his involvement with the Manson family, and usually became upset when the subject was broached. Movie role: Dennis Wilson starred alongside James Taylor and Warren Oates in the critically acclaimed film Two-Lane Blacktop as the mechanic. The film depicts the driver, and the mechanic driving aimlessly across the United States in their 1955 Chevy, surviving on money earned from street drag racing. Solo career: early in 1963, Dennis teamed with Brian's former collaborator Gary Usher, a neighbor in Hawthorne who became a prolific creative figure in surf music recording, and later, folk. As a duo writing, producing and performing and calling themselves the Four Speeds, they released the single RPM/My Stingray. Both sides got top 4-star ratings in Billboard reviews mid-March '63 and turned out popular enough locally and in spots cross-country to earn and lose Denny, in a drunk driving crash, a Chevy Cavalli sports car. On December 4, 1970, Wilson released his first piece of solo material, a little-known single released only in Europe and the UK under the name Dennis Wilson and Rumbo. The single featured Sound of Free, on his usual theme of freedom, on the A-side with The Romantic Lady on the B-side. The song was later covered by American Spring and released as the B-side to their single Shine Away. Pacific Ocean Blue, Wilson released his debut solo album Pacific Ocean Blue in 1977. His collaborators on the album included Daryl Dragon and Greg Jacobson. The album peaked at number 96 in the US and sold around 300,000 copies, matching that year's Beach Boys album Love You. Dates were booked for a Dennis Wilson solo tour but these were ultimately cancelled. However, Wilson did occasionally perform his solo material on the 1977 Beach Boys tour. Despite Wilson himself claiming the album had no substance, Pacific Ocean Blue performed well critically and continues to maintain a cult following. Wilson's trademark gravelly and melancholy vocals resonate throughout the work. The album was out of print for more than a decade before being reissued in June 2008. The expanded Sony Legacy Edition was voted the 2008 reissue of the year in both Rolling Stone and Mojo magazines and made number 16 on the British LP charts and number 8 and both the Billboard Catalog Chart and the Billboard Internet Sales Chart. Bamboo, Pacific Ocean Blues follow-up, Bamboo, began production in the year 1978 at Brother Studios in Santa Monica with the collaboration of then Beach Boys keyboardist and Dennis's close friend Khalima +/- songwriter and producer. The first 4 songs that were officially recorded for Bamboo are +/- compositions, It's Not Too Late, Constant Companion, All Alone, and Under the Moonlight. They appear on the final 2008 release. The project was initially scuttled by lack of financing and the distractions of simultaneous Beach Boys projects. Bamboo was officially released in 2008 along with the Pacific Ocean Blue reissue. 2 songs from the Bamboo sessions, Love Surrounds Me, and Baby Blue, were lifted for the Beach Boys' 1979 LA. Wilson and brother Brian also recorded together apart from the Beach Boys in 1980 and 1981. These sessions remain unreleased though widely bootlegged as the Cocaine Sessions. Personal life: at the time of his death, Wilson was married to Shawn Marie Love, the mother of his son Gage, born September 3, 1982. Shawn Marie died aged 38 in September 2003 of liver cancer. Wilson's previous marriages were to Carol Friedman, with whom he had a daughter, Jennifer, and whose son, Scott, he adopted, and Barbara Charon, with whom he had 2 sons, Michael and Cal. Wilson also was married twice to Karen Lamb, the ex-wife of Chicago keyboardist Robert Lamb, once in 1976 and again in 1978. Wilson was quoted in the sleeve notes for the album All Summer Long. Dennis also had a significant relationship with Christine McVie from 1979 to 1981. Death: succeeding years saw Wilson battling alcohol abuse. Smoking had taken a toll on his voice, although the resultant gravelly effect helped define him as a singer. On December 28, 1983, shortly after his 39th birthday, Wilson drowned at Marina del Rey, Los Angeles, after drinking all day and diving in the afternoon to recover items he had thrown overboard at the marina from his yacht 3 years prior. Dennis Wilson's body was buried at sea off the California coast by the U.S. Coast Guard on January 4, 1984. His song Farewell My Friend was played at the funeral. As non-veterans of the Coast Guard and Navy are not allowed to be buried at sea unless cremated, Dennis' burial was possible due to the intervention of President Reagan. Solo discography, albums, singles, quotations. Hey, surfing's getting really big. You guys ought to write a song about it. Wilson stated, on hearing Surfin' on the radio for the first time. "We got so excited hearing our record on the radio that Carl threw up, and I ran down the street screaming." Later, in 1977, Dennis Wilson stated, "There'd be many times when I'd look at my brother and think to myself, maybe he won't ever pull it together again. Brian went through a lot of bad times. Drugs didn't help." See also: The Beach Boys, list of songs by Dennis Wilson, Beach Boys historic landmark, references. Further reading: John Stebbins, Dennis Wilson, The Real Beach Boy. ECW Press 2000. ISBN 1-55022-404-2, Adam Webb, Dumb Angel, The Life and Music of Dennis Wilson. Creation Books, 2001. ISBN 1-84068-051-2, external links, The Beach Boys, Sea of Heartbreak, Dennis Wilson's majestic solo work, at Pop Matters, 2007, by Tony Sclafani, the official site of Pacific Ocean Blue, Dennis Wilson at Find a Grave, Beach Boys drummer buried in Rights at Sea.